הפודקאסט בחסות דאטה מדיה, המלווה ומייעצת לחברות בארץ ובחול בנושא אימייל מרקטינג, אווירות אימיילים ובחירה והטמעה של מערכות דיוור.
CRM.Buzz, בלוג ופודקאסט בנושאי ניהול קשרי לקוחות, חוויית לקוח, שיווק, שימור לקוחות, טכנולוגיה ודאטה. מגיש סלע יופי.
I had a client that we were doing cart abandonment emails. Every cart abandonment email we sent generated $16. Well, how would you like it if every email you sent generated $16? I mean, we'd all be very wealthy. There were other emails that generated 0.016. And so when you talk to management about what we need to be doing, stuff like that makes it really clear, and it's hard for them to argue with those numbers. Like I said, unless it's like, oh, well, that was the message from the president, we need to keep doing it. But it's hard to argue with, this is a limited resource. If we overmail our list, they're going to stop opening and responding. There's erosion that happens.
אתם על CRM.Buzz. ועכשיו?
אני מתחיל היום משהו חדש ושונה בפודקאסט. רעיונות עם אנשי אימייל מרקטינג מובילים מהעולם. נכון, ישנם כמה וכמה פודקאסטים מצוינים באנגלית בנושא אימייל מרקטינג, אבל אני רוצה לשמור על ייחודו של הפודקאסט בעברית ולדוברי עברית. הפודקאסט ישלב עברית ואנגלית כפי שמקובל לעשות בתוכניות רדיו עם אורח בשפה זרה. אני אשאל את השאלות בעברית, האורחים שלי ידברו באנגלית, ולאחר כל מקטע אתרגם בקצרה. האורחת הראשונה שלי היא ג'ין ג'נינגס, שמנהלת את קהילת Only Influencers, בה גם אני חבר. חברים בקהילה הזאת, מעל 400 אנשי אימייל מרקטינג מהמובילים בעולם. ג'ין למעלה מ-20 שנה בעולם האימייל מרקטינג, ויש לה משרד בוטיק לייעוץ בנושא אסטרטגיית אימייל מרקטינג. בוקר טוב ג'ין, ותודה שהצטרפת אלינו מביתך בוושינגטון. ספרי לי על קהילת Only Influencers.
Hey, well, first of all, thank you for having me on the podcast today, Sela. I'm really honored to be here. And yeah, it's been great getting to know you through Only Influencers, which we call OI for short. I think it's really neat. OI is the original community of email industry professionals. It was started about 13 years ago, officially, but there was actually an unofficial core group of us that were on the list before that, by Bill McCloskey. And I took it over about 2.5 years ago when he retired. But Only Influencers is really neat. It's basically anyone who's in the email industry can join. And it's a way to meet other people in the industry and network, which is great for your career, whether you're looking to hire people or whether you're looking for your own next job move. But more than that, it's a place where people can go to talk about email. So we have some really interesting discussions. When the pandemic started, we started doing a Thursday live Zoom, which I often see you on. Yeah. And we bring in people who have authored industry columns, and we talk about topics. And I think it's really neat to get the chance to talk to people who are writing about these things like Apple's MPP, acquisitions when they come up, any kind of new technology that comes in, we talk about. So it's really a neat group, and there's a lot of people like you that I've met through there that I've never actually met in person, but I consider you industry friends because you just get to know people. A lot of the people that you read in the email marketing world are members of Only Influencers, people like Chad White with Oracle Marketing Consulting, and Jenna Tiffany with Let's Talk Strategy, and Gavin Legini from Digital. And so really we just... we're a group of email marketing industry professionals. We want to help members with their careers, but members also have very much an outward perspective of trying to do things that are in the best interest of the industry.
ג'ין מנהלת את קהילת Only Influencers בשנתיים וחצי האחרונות. חברים בקהילה, אנשים מובילים כגון צ'אד ווייט מאורקל, הוא זה שכתב את התנ"ך בנושא אימייל מרקטינג, ספר שנקרא אימייל מרקטינג רולס, אבל חברים בקהילה גם אנשים אחרים מהמובילים בתעשייה. גרעין קטן מהקהילה נפגש בימי חמישי, אחת לשבוע בזום, והם מדברים על נושאים שברומו של עולם האימייל מרקטינג.
Yeah, well, the industry is always been one where people help each other. I think it's because a lot of us started in this industry very early. I started my career in online in 1989 with CompuServe, which was really early. And so a lot of us kind of grew up in this industry. And when you're doing that, at CompuServe, we used to call online bleeding edge. It wasn't cutting edge, it was bleeding edge. And you were trying to figure it out. And it was really neat because as people figured it out, they were very generous with writing about it. So, you have people like Jacob Nielsen, who was very early in the usability and websites and things like that. You also have a lot of people in the email industry that were very early. I was sort of on that early group, but also Karen Talavera, who's Synchronicity Marketing, and Kath Pay with Holistic Email, and Lauren McDonald, who's now left us for the electric car vehicle industry, but was very active when he was with Silverpop. And it's neat because even when people were at competitive organizations, they were friendly. And that's really what Only Influencers really wants to continue and make sure doesn't leave the industry. The idea of people helping each other, the idea of people working together for the greater good of the industry, which has always been part of it. And, to that end, we do a lot of things that benefit members, but we also do a lot of things that benefit non-members. So things like our Only Influencers newsletter, which gets published once a week. Janet Roberts, who is a well-known name in the industry, is actually our newsletter editor and does a great job. We usually have anywhere from 9 to 12 articles about what's hot and going on in the industry. Typically, the first 2 or 3 are from our blog, and then we actively feature our members' articles because a lot of our members are influencers. So that's really great. We also have, as I mentioned, our blog, which a lot of folks write for. Jenna Davini from Webula. Yeah. Like I said, we have Chad White. We have George Schlossnagel from Spark Post. And that's another thing that's free. Even if you're not a member, you can read those. And then we do webinars. We have an upcoming webinar at the end of May on Apple MPP. It's actually, we're calling it a community update because the idea is we have a survey out there now asking people how MPP has impacted their program and how it's impacted them as marketers. And we also have a thing that says, what outstanding questions do you have? Because there's still a lot of misinformation about MPP out there, and we want to correct it. We were one of the first to do a webinar on MPP last June, right after it was announced. Yeah, and I wish I could tell you we got everything right. I'm not sure we got everything right, but we were out of the gate and we got a lot of it right. And so we want to continue that. And then we do special reports. Another area of interest for the industry is diversity, primarily racial diversity. So we recently published our 2nd annual Racial Diversity in the Email Industry report. And we actually have a goal to try to make the industry match the population at large by January 2025. We're also having a gender diversity special report that'll be published. That'll also be our 2nd annual. Last year we did them both together. And then we have the OI Metrics project, which is actually oimetrics.com that we launched, which is basically a resource for people to get to understand email marketing metrics more. I think that numbers are really important to this channel, and that's how you're going to improve.
Only Influencers היא קהילה של אנשי אימייל מרקטינג, שלמרות שחלקם אפילו מתחרים, עוזרים אחד לשני. הקהילה עוזרת לחבריה, זה מה שמייחד אותה, אבל היא גם עוזרת כלפי חוץ, בין השאר על ידי חינוך שוק, על ידי יצירה של בלוגים ומאמרים שזמינים לכולם, לא רק לחברי הקהילה, גם וובינרים על נושאים בוערים, בין השאר מהראשונים לצאת עם וובינר בנושא אפל MPP, שינוי הפרטיות שאפל ערכה. תרומה נוספת של הקהילה היא אתר עם מדדי אימייל מרקטינג, אתר עם הרבה מאוד תוכן שעוסק במטריקות, במדדים של אימייל מרקטינג.
And that's what the Metrics Project is set up for. And we actually recently did Masters of Email Marketing Metrics quiz, where we invited people to answer 10 questions. All of the answers to these questions were available on oimetrics.com, and we actually linked to it. And it was interesting. Out of about, I think, 79 people who took it, only 6 got them all right. So there's a real need.
People from the industry.
People from the industry, yeah. The average score was like a D. I think the average score was like less than 7 out of 10 right. So there's a real need out there to understand these numbers, because once you understand them, it makes you even better at your job. It makes you much more powerful. Yeah. It gives you the ability to do a lot more with your program. So that's another thing. Again, all of these things are available for people who aren't members. I think the thing that you miss if you're not a member is the networking opportunities, which I think is actually quite valuable. So yeah, we invite people to join. It's $200 a year, or if you want to join on a monthly basis, it's $20 a month. And literally anyone who's in the email marketing industry can join. You don't have to be someone who's blogged for 20 years about it, who's been working in the industry for 30 years. Really, anyone is welcome. And we love to have new people.
מעניין היה לגלות חלק מאנשי התעשייה שענו על שאלון בנושא מדדי אימייל מרקטינג לא כל כך ידעו את התשובות, למרות שהתשובות לשאלות נמצאות באתר OI Metrics. את כתובת האתר וגם את כתובת Only Influencers אשים בשואו נוטס. ג'ין גם מספרת איך אפשר להצטרף לקהילה. הסכום הוא לא גדול, סדר גודל של $200 בשנה, וכל מי שעוסק באימייל מרקטינג מוזמן להצטרף. אמרתי לג'ין שאולי הפסדתי פעם אחת את המפגש השבועי של הקהילה שמתרחש בזום, ושאני מאוד נהנה מהשיתוף פעולה והעזרה ההדדית שמתקיימים במהלך הפגישות האלה.
Yeah, and that's one thing we want to keep alive. And, you know, the other nice thing about the Thursday calls is, first of all, it's cameras on. Yeah. So it's not a webinar, it's not a lecture, it's literally a discussion. And we don't record them. So if you want to be a part of it, you have to be there. Yeah. But yeah, a lot of friendships have been made, a lot of business deals have been struck. Yeah. From those Thursday events. And when else are you going to have the chance to be in a group of, typically we have, you know, around 20 people, talking to a Chad White or talking to a George Schlossnagel or whoever is the author, and even just, you know, sharing ideas and thoughts. So it's really kind of a special thing. We're very proud of it. Yeah. I'm so glad that you're a part of it too.
ג'ין מספרת על מפגשי יום חמישי, שזה מפגש בזום, קבוצה מאוד קטנה, 8, 10, 20 אנשים, ומתי יוצא לך לשבת ולדבר עם מישהו כמו צ'אד ווייט מאורקל, או מישהו כמו ג'ורג' שלוזינגל מייסד ספארק פוסט, או מישהו אחר בכיר בתעשייה, ככה בקבוצה קטנה.
And if you go there, you can read the blog, you can sign up for the newsletter, and you can also register to join us. And also we have our past webinars there available on demand, as well as our special reports for download. And you can also see about our upcoming webinars, which are free. So yeah, I encourage everyone to check it out. It's really a great resource. I should say that I was a member from the start, and I was a huge fan. And then when Bill retired and asked me to step in, it was they were big shoes to fill, but I was honored to do it. So I've been a fan of OI long before I was the general manager.
למעשה כשביל פרש ואת נכנסת לנהל את Only Influencers, זה לווה ברכישה על ידי גוף שהיה שותף של ביל, הוא הגוף המארגן של ועידת אימייל Innovation Summit. תוכלי לספר קצת על זה?
So, yeah, he sold Only Influencers along with his share of the conference to Rising Media, his conference partner. Mm-hmm. And they've been just wonderful to work with. We've done a lot of new things since Bill left, some new ideas, and they've always been very supportive. And yeah, so that's been really good. And just a quick plug for the conference. So Email Innovations Summit is in Las Vegas. Knock on wood, we're going to be back in person this year. It's June 20th to 22nd. The idea behind our conference, we really try to set ourselves apart. There's a lot of conferences where you can go to learn the basics of, you know, email marketing and, you know, what is deliverability. And we don't really cover that. We really are focused on innovations. We want to provide people who have successful programs with the information they need to take them to the next level. So, for instance, BIMI, which became available, I don't know, I think within the last year. We've been talking about BIMI for 4 or 5 years now. And we have another session on BIMI this year. Now, it's interesting because this year we're using BIMI as our point-counterpoint session. So we'll have Brian Sisolak arguing that you don't actually need BIMI anymore. And we'll have Matt Vernhout, who's been involved with BIMI since the beginning, touting the fact that you actually do need BIMI. So that'll be really interesting. We have Ryan Phelan, who is with RPE Origin. He has a great keynote for us. It's kind of a post-COVID pep talk for email marketers, which I think we could all use after almost 2 years of a pandemic. I should have mentioned that Brian Sisolak is with Peak Inbox and Matthew Vernhout is with NetCore Cloud. And then we have Matthew Dunn is going to be our keynote on the second day. He's actually taking a look at Apple MPP and some of the other things that are out there. And he's kind of got a cautionary tale for email marketers and kind of a rallying cry for the industry. So that should be really fun. And then we have all sorts of other sessions on metrics. We have Della Quist, who's going to be talking on Apple MPP. So it's really a place to come, not if you're a newbie and you don't really know email marketing, but if you've got a successful program, you know enough to be dangerous, come here and learn what you really need to know to take your program to the next level.
אימייל Innovation Summit מנסה לייחד את עצמה בכך שהיא פונה למדברים ותיקים יותר, לכאלה שרוצים לשייף ולחדד דברים, באמצעות דיבור על הדברים החדשים שקורים באימייל מרקטינג. במקרה הזה הם ידברו על אפל MPP וההשפעות שלו, ועל נושא של בימי, כן צריך או לא צריך, יש שם מין דיבייט בעניין הזה, וג'ין הסכימה לתת למאזיני הפודקאסט את קוד ההנחה שרלוונטי רק לחברי הקהילה.
We actually have a little super secret promotion. So if you use the promo code ONLYINFLUENCERS, all capitals, letters, no spaces, you can get 15% off your registration to the conference.
הרבה אנשים מספרים שהם נפלו לעסוק באימייל מרקטינג. כלומר, זה משהו שקרה ולא משהו שהם התכוונו שיקרה. איך את התחלת לעסוק באימייל מרקטינג?
Wow. Well, I started in online right out of graduate school. I went to work for CompuServe, and I was working at a .com, and I was doing email, but I was also doing other channels. And my boss there left and went to Reed Business Information, which is Reed Elsevier, B2B publisher, largest one in the country back then. And it was actually called Connors before it was called Reed Business Information, which some people know the Connors name. And I'll never forget, because I went up to New York and I had lunch with him. And he said, I really want to hire you here. And I said, I would really love to work for you here. And he said, here's the thing. He's like, I've got approval for a few positions right now. And he's like, one of them is email marketing. And you would be head of all email marketing for product development. You'd have a dotted line to the marketing team to do email marketing with them. And I have confidence in you, and I know that you can do this. So, why don't you take this role, and I'll make you a promise. If in 6 months you're not happy with email, by that time, I'll have some other positions I can hire, and I will move you somewhere. Because I know that I want you on my team, and but this is what I have, and I think you'll like it. But if you don't, and I was like, you know what, I'm happy to do it, to work with you. Let's do this. Let's give it a shot. And I got to tell you, I have never looked back. I love email. Once I had, I knew a little bit about it, but I really dove into the industry. Back then, ClickZ was one of the main publications, and I remember every morning going to ClickZ and reading what was there about email marketing. And then about a year in, I actually met some folks at ClickZ, and they asked if I would write a column, which was thrilling to me. So I got to write a column there I wrote for them for like over 12 years, every other week. So yeah, I guess I kind of fell into it. I have Mark Potts, who is now back in the consulting world, to thank for it. But yeah, it's just been really great. And I remember going to my first conference and seeing Lauren McDonald at the bar. And I ran up to Lauren and I said, hi, you don't know me, but I've been reading your stuff. And I just think you're so smart. And he looks at me and he goes, oh, you're Jeanne Jennings. I said, I am. And he said, I've been reading your stuff. So stuff like that, I think, was really cool that, back in the day. So yeah, it's been a fun ride, and just super nice people in the industry. I think that's the other reason I've really stayed. Some of my very best friends are in the industry now. And that's just how the industry is.
ג'ין מספרת שהיא התחילה באימייל מרקטינג כסוג של משרה זמנית שהפכה לקבועה. בהמשך היא כתבה במשך 12 שנה למגזין ClickZ, והיא מאוד אוהבת את התעשייה. הרבה מאוד אנשים מהתעשייה חברים טובים עד היום.
CRM.Buzz.
את מנהלת סוכנות בוטיק לאימייל מרקטינג, ויצא לך גם לעבוד לאורך השנים עם השמות הגדולים, הייתי אומר, בנושא אימייל מרקטינג.
I do. I actually started my boutique consultancy email optimization shop back in 2001. So it's been about 20 years now.
Amazing.
And I've worked really hard, but I've been really lucky. I've worked with some great brands like Hasbro and Verizon and Synchrony Financial and Capital One, PayPal. So it's been a really fun ride. And I feel really lucky. I do B2B, I do B2C, I do all sorts of industries, AARP, National Association of Realtors, National Education Association. So it's been really, really great.
ג'ין הקימה את סוכנות האימייל מרקטינג שלה ב-2001, ועבדה במשך השנים עם השמות הגדולים, שמות כמו eBay ופייפל והספרו וורייזון. אני חושב שמאזיני הפודקאסט שלי ישמחו ללמוד ממך. תוכלי לשתף אותנו ב-case study אחד או יותר?
I would love that. A big part of my work with clients is actually doing A/B split testing for them. It's important to A/B split test, even if you're sure that a change you're going to make is going to improve performance. You want to make sure your audience agrees with you on that. The other nice thing about A/B split testing is if anyone ever asks why you made that change last year, questions it, you can just pull the report and say, we made this change because it increased revenue by 46%. And usually people go, oh, okay. So it really gets it out of the realm. But the other thing that I run into is, obviously we want our emails to be attractive, but mostly I want them to make money. So what is attractive is very subjective. I might like an email and you might dislike it or vice versa, but which one made more money is not subjective at all. And that's typically what it's about, or which one generated the most leads or whatever. So that's the other reason A/B split testing is really good.
אחד הדברים החשובים שג'ין מספרת שהיא רואה בעבודה שלה, זה עבודה על A/B טסט, A/B ספליט טסט. היא מספרת על האופן שבו היא מבצעת A/B ספליט טסט, ואני טוען שבהרבה מערכות דיוור בכלל מאוד מאוד קשה לעשות את ה-A/B טסט בתוך המערכת.
So here's the thing of it, right? I would say in most cases, perhaps not all, but in most cases, that A/B split test functionality that your ESP builds into its software, in most cases, it's absolutely useless. And worse than that, it actually can send you in the wrong direction. And they, I know that they're trying. I know that they are. But, I have a client right now that does an A/B split test on their subject line before every send. And what they do is they do a pre-send. So they take out a small portion of the list, they split it in two, they send two different subject lines. Like 2 or 3 hours later, whichever subject line has the highest click-through rate, so this at least is going to click-through rate, that's what they send to everyone. But what I found out was that in most cases, the sample sizes they're using are so small that the results are not statistically significant. Yeah. And if they're not statistically significant, it means there's no difference. So again, it's a coin flip what they're telling you to use. And then you go back to the fact that, and they're better than most. Most people, if it's a subject line test, they're going to want to use open rate as your KPI, which is awful. They're using click-through rate. But again, going back to that analysis that I did, that is only accurate 7% of the time.
Wow.
So with those two factors, I basically said to them, you just need to stop doing this because you could be hurting yourself, you could be helping yourself. We have no idea.
רק כדי לעשות סדר, בהרבה מערכות דיוור, בכלל הפונקציונליות של A/B טסט מאפשרת נניח לבדוק רק כותרות ולא את התוכן עצמו. בחלק מהם את לא יכולה לשנות את שם השולח או את כתובת האימייל שלו. כלומר, מאוד קשה לעשות את ה-A/B ספליט טסט הזה במערכת הדיוור. גם הרבה מערכות דיוור לא מאפשרות לך לעשות יותר משתי גרסאות ולבדוק נניח 5 גרסאות. מה את אומרת על זה?
In order to do a good A/B split test, you're actually going to need to go outside of the functionality that your ESP provides. You're going to need to take a look at your list. My rule is at least 20,000 per cell, which means you need at least 40,000 to test. If you have less than that on your list, you can test something that's universal over a few sends.
Yeah.
But you can also use a sample size calculator to figure out what your sample size should be. Tim Watson has one online that's really great. But that's the problem. I rarely end up using any of those A/B split tests that are built into the ESPs because they're just useless. I had a client years ago that was doing the same thing with subject lines before every send. And, again, same problems, not stat sig, not working off, in that case, they were just trying to drive traffic to a site. So their KPI was total clicks, not click-through rate, but total clicks, not basing it on that. And the other great thing is they had it set up to do a test before every send. And one option was newsletter for and today's date. And the other option was the title of the first article in the newsletter. And literally, when we looked back, the title of the article of the first newsletter article always won, always beat the static, which is not surprising. And I said, it's time to turn it off. And they said, but what if? When they set it up, they told us we should always do this. And I said, why? It never wins. It never wins. So that's another thing there's a lot of misunderstanding about how to do A/B split testing out there. There's a lot of, like I said, even the ESP vendors, I know they have the best intentions, but the things that they're setting up for clients are typically not very good. And they're giving clients a false sense of security that they're doing a good job on their A/B split testing.
Yeah.
It's just a shame. It's got to stop. You've got to do it manually right now, or you've got to use a third-party software. But yeah, that functionality in your ESP for A/B split testing, just ignore it. Definitely don't pay extra for it.
ג'ין אומרת שמהניסיון שלה, רוב מערכות הדיוור לא מספקות את הסחורה בכל מה שקשור ל-A/B split test. בעצם כדי לעשות את העבודה הנכונה, צריך להוציא את הנתונים אל מחוץ למערכת הדיוור ולעשות את הניתוח חיצונית למערכת הדיוור. הפונקציונליות שקיימת במערכת הדיוור, בהרבה מקרים לוקחת את המשווק, את המדבר, נותנת לה אולי תחושה של אמונה בנתונים, אבל למעשה אפילו יכולה לקחת אותו למקום לא נכון. ביקשתי מג'ין לציין case study נוסף, והיא משתפת ב-case study שגרוס האקינג קטן, פשוט, ממש לשנות מיקום של טופס הרשמה, הוביל לשינוי דרמטי בכמות ההרשמות.
One of the things I did a while ago was a case study I wrote up from my blog, which is at emailopshop.com, was about email list growth, which I think is really important to any program. You always want to be bringing new names on file. And there's a couple of reasons. It's not just to keep your list a decent size, because you want to make sure that you're bringing on more people than you lose through unsubscribes and attrition. But the other reason that it's very important to have good list growth is that those new names, they perform a lot better than people who've been on your list a while. They open at a much higher rate. They click at a much higher rate. They convert at a much higher rate. Yeah. So that's another reason. The higher percentage of your list that is, newer, the better your performance is going to be. So it's interesting because a few years ago, it was actually when I was consulting for the American Institute of Architects. It's the first time I heard this. We were going through a site redesign with them. And the site designer put the email sign up in the footer. And I was like, no, it needs to be above the fold. And they were like, no, it belongs in the footer. That's a best practice. Yeah, it belongs in the footer. And I was sort of shocked. And so one of the things that I started testing was when I ran into people like AIA and other places where it was in the footer, is we started testing putting it above the fold. And every time I am able to test moving that call to action from the footer to above the fold, we see a lift in list growth, because people are only going to the footer if they're looking for a return policy or complain about something. The case study that I wrote up earlier this year, we actually got a 46% increase in email list growth just by moving that email sign up from the footer to above the fold, to the header. We didn't make any other changes to it. And I've seen similar increases, like I said, every time I test it. So, if you're a web designer, it may be a best practice in your world, but if you actually want to grow your list, it needs to be above the fold. And I think the biggest reason I hear for people not wanting it above the fold is that it's not their primary goal for the website. Well, but I don't want to, deter people from buying. I don't want to deter people from filling out a lead gen form. And I hear that. But a very small percentage of your site visitors are probably going to be ready to do that on the first visit. And if they're not ready to take that action that you want on the first visit, it's much better if they sign up for email before they leave than if they don't. Because if they don't sign up for email, you have no way to go contact them again and reach out. And the chances of them coming back to your site are very slim. Whereas if you get the ability to get their email address, you can email them, you can start building a relationship. I kind of think of it back in the day, we used to have a lot of fun at conferences because there were a lot of dating analogies that we used for email. So I almost feel like it's kind of like, no, if they come to the site, I want them to buy. If they're not going to buy, I don't want to distract them from that. But that's a high commitment. There's a high level of commitment there. It's almost saying like, I'm going to go to a bar and I'm just going to start asking people to marry me. If they're not willing to marry me, that's it. I don't care. And that's not how it works with relationships. So getting someone's email address is sort of like getting your digits, and it gives you the ability to start building a relationship with them. Then the more they know about your brand through an excellent welcome series and informational content as well as, sales content, the more likely they are to come back and buy. And that's really what email is about.
ג'ין מספרת על איזשהו ויכוח שהיה לה עם מעצבי אתרים סביב המיקום של שדה ההרשמה לאימייל. האם לשים אותו למטה? מעצבי אתרים חושבים שנכון לשים אותו למטה, אולי כי ככה הם רגילים. היא אמרה להם, בוא נשים אותו למעלה, לא בפוטר אלא בהדר, למעלה, כמה above the fold מה שנקרא. ורק השינוי הזה הוביל לצמיחה בכמות ההרשמות החדשות, מעל 46%, והיא גם מספרת על החשיבות של הרשמות חדשות, רשומות טריות שייכנסו לרשימת הדיבור, הן חשובות מאוד כי הן פעילות יותר מאשר הרשומות הוותיקות יותר.
CRM.Buzz.
נושא המטריקות לא תמיד בהיר אפילו לאנשים מהתעשייה עצמה, מתעשיית האימייל עצמה. תוכלי לספר על מטריקה מסוימת שאת אוהבת לבדוק במיוחד, משהו שהוא לא שכיח, משהו שבדרך כלל לא בודקים?
Yeah, so RPE, revenue per email, is my very favorite metric of all time. Hands down, no question. It's easy to calculate. You take the revenue that campaign generated and you divide it by the number of emails that you sent. So it's very easy to calculate. It's much easier to calculate than return on investment, ROI, or even return on ad spend, ROAS. And it's a great, if you do an A/B split test and you use your revenue per email as your KPI, you're very clearly going to see which email drove more revenue for every email that you sent. And that's why it's my very favorite metric. It's a much better KPI than an open rate or a click-through rate or anything like that. Revenue per email is a business metric. It goes directly to your bottom line. Revenue for most companies is what keeps the lights on in their business. If you are looking for lead gen from your email, if you need a sales rep to become involved before a sale's done, then you want to take a look at, leads generated. But open and click-through rates are great diagnostic metrics, which means if you are looking to improve your revenue per email, you can look at your open and click-through rates and you can kind of figure out which levers you need to shift to make that happen. So for instance, if you look at your open and click-through rates and you have a really good open rate and you have a poor click-through rate, then it's very clear you need to work on the body of your email and get that click-through rate up. A lot of people are using an open rate or a click-through rate as a KPI, which is a really bad idea. And we actually found, when I looked back at a series of testing I had done for a client in late 2020, I looked at all of the tests. I looked at the winners based on revenue per email.
Yeah.
And then I looked at the click-through rates for those. And what I found was only in 7% of the cases did a higher click-through rate indicate a higher revenue per email.
Interesting.
7% of the cases. So if you've got a program right now and you're relying on click-through rate as your KPI, you could be getting it wrong 93% of the time. And that's pretty scary. And open rates too, especially now with MPP. I mean, open rates were never an absolute measure.
Yeah.
There was always a margin of error. Now there's an even higher one. If you're testing subject lines, you do not want to be using open rate as your KPI because it's not about getting them to open the email. It's about getting them to convert or turn into a lead or whatever you need past the email. And so even if you're testing subject lines, you want to use a business metric, not a diagnostic metric like open rate to be your KPI.
מדברים משתמשים במטריקות הלא נכונות, בהרבה מקרים שימוש במדדים הקלאסיים שבהם משתמשים באימייל מרקטינג. click-through rate ו-open rate הם מדדים סטטיסטיים, הם מדדים דיאגנוסטיים. המדדים העסקיים הם המדדים שלפיהם נכון לדבריה למדוד את הצלחת האימייל מרקטינג. בהרבה מקרים גם היא מדווחת על זה שמבדיקות שהיא ערכה, המדדים האלה של open ו-click היו בסתירה מוחלטת לעומת המדדים העסקיים. כלומר, אם מסתמכים על המדדים של open ו-click, במקרים רבים זה יכול לקחת אותנו לכיוון לא נכון. אחד המדדים שהיא מאוד אוהבת הוא revenue per email, שיטה יחסית פשוטה לחשב את הרווח מאימייל, לקחת את ה-revenue שהגיע מאותו קמפיין ולחלק אותו במספר הדיוורים.
It's also a great way to convince management of things, because if you can say this email that we send, and this is an actual, I had a client that we were doing cart abandonment emails. Every cart abandonment email we sent generated $16. Well, how would you like it if every email you sent generated $16? I mean, we'd all be very wealthy. There were other emails that generated 0.016. And so when you talk to management about what we need to be doing, stuff like that makes it really clear, and it's hard for them to argue with those numbers. Like I said, unless it's like, oh, well, that was the message from the president, we need to keep doing it. But it's hard to argue with, this is a limited resource. If we overmail our list, they're going to stop opening and responding. There's erosion that happens. And so, you need to make sure you're not overmailing. You could be undermailing, that happens. But in general, if you're overmailing, you want to get rid of those things that aren't generating enough revenue for every hit. I also have had clients where this is the best, where you're sending an email and the number of unsubscribes is greater than the number of clicks. So you're sending this email and more people are raising their hand and saying, take me off your list, don't ever email me again, than are saying, oh yeah, this is interesting, let me learn more. So that's another thing you can take a look at and you need to decide. And that's, typically if it's an email like that, it's going to have a very low revenue per email. But if it's got a low revenue per email and your unsubscribe rate is higher than your click-through rate, because unsubscribes are not included in click-through rate, then that's definitely an email that needs to either be dramatically changed or just go away, because that's doing more harm than good.
אנשי אימייל מרקטינג אולי מדברים ב-open rate או click rate או מדדים אחרים, אבל revenue per email הוא מדד מצוין לתקשר את ההצלחה של פעילות האימייל מול הנהלות. ולכן הוא מדד שיותר אולי נכון לעבוד איתו גם בהיבט הזה. מטריקה מעניינת נוספת שאת מדברת עליה לא מעט היא click reach ו-open reach, שיש להם חשיבות בדיאלוג סביב אימייל מרקטינג. תוכלי להסביר על מה מדובר?
So if you're doing a multi-effort series, let's say you have a 3-effort welcome series, or even more common, let's say you have a 3-effort abandoned cart series. Rather than, or in addition to looking at each performance of each one individually, which you should do, what you really want to get to is the performance of the 3 of them together, because that's really what matters. It's like every email stands alone, but together they're supposed to be greater than the sum of their parts. So for instance, let's say that for each of those emails, you get a 4% click-through rate. So then you have to ask yourself, well, is it a different 4% of people every time? Is it really a 12% that I've got clicking, or is it the same 4%? Because that's a big difference, right? If it's the same 4%, that's okay. But if it's a different 4% or, significantly, so that's what click reach tells you, because click reach takes a look at the number of people you send to, so not the email sent, but the number of people you send to. And then every send, it adds the new people who clicked, who didn't click on the first one. So if you're doing a multi-effort series, that's really what you want, because in a multi-effort series, you want to see the number of unique clickers grow with each email. That also gives you a good idea. If you still, let's say you're doing a 3-effort series, and let's say you still see significant growth in new clickers on that last email, that suggests you should be doing another effort. because there's the potential for even more. So that's why click reach is really important. And I think it's a shame not many ESPs will give you that right out of the box. And in fact, it's a little bit daunting to try to calculate if you're working with really big lists, which a lot of my clients are. You need to get a data analytics person involved because you've got to dedupe the unique clickers for each one. But it can be really useful to see what's going on. The other thing we find is sometimes there's an effort in the middle where we really don't get any new clickers at all. So for that one, you look at that and go, wow, so maybe we should move it. Maybe we should get rid of it. Maybe we should change it. So it gives you a lot more insight into what's happening with that series. And it gives you a lot more avenues to consider for hypotheses to do A/B split testing to boost performance.
שוב אנחנו חוזרים להבנה של מטריקות. קליק ריץ' ואופן ריץ', כך זה ברוב מערכות הדיוור, דורשים בעצם מהמדברים לייצא נתונים ולנתח אותם מחוץ למערכת הדיוור, כדי להבין מה הייתה התרומה של סדרת דיוורים למאמץ השיווקי.
Yeah, I think this is really important. You've got to know how to calculate these metrics, and you've got to understand what's behind them. I can't tell you how many times it happened like a month or two ago. I was working with a client. They sent me over their metrics, and I had to send a note back and say, so I'm pretty sure these are total opens, not unique opens. And the answer came back, nope, those are unique opens. And I said, well, your open rates are coming in at 109 to 194%, which tells me that they can't be unique opens because you can't have unique people. You understand, right? Yeah. If you're sending to 100 people and you're telling me you had 194 unique opens, that's just not possible. Yeah. And so I think that's one thing that people need to know enough about the metrics that they know. Oh, an open rate can't be greater than 100%. And they have to understand the difference between a total open and a unique open. And you have to understand how to calculate these things. I talked to another person the other day and we were talking about, and we're going to get into Apple MPP more a little bit later, but we were talking about open rates and how they're not useful anymore. And then I asked about her click-through rates and she said, oh, we don't look at our click-through rates. We focus on our click-to-open rates, which is calculated by clicks divided by opens. And I said, well, you understand that's tainted now too with Apple MPP. You can't rely on CTOR anymore. And she said, oh, yes, we can, because it's not open rate. Yeah, but the reason open rate's bad is because the opens are inflated. And so anything you're using opens for is now going to be wrong. It's going to inflate your denominator, which is going to make the whole number smaller. And she was like, oh, I never thought about that.
מדברים לא מכירים מספיק את הניואנסים בין המטריקות השונות, וזה יוצר בלבול. הזכרת את נושא אפל MPP. שינוי הפרטיות שאפל ערכה, תוכלי לספר על זה קצת? מה ההשפעות של זה וכולי?
So last June of 2021, Apple announced that they were going to start implementing, giving users the option to sign up for Apple Mail Privacy Protection MPP. And they were going to start it with iOS 15 rollout, which happened in September. And basically what this does is, the idea is that the way they positioned it is marketers are looking, they know when you open an email, they know where you were when you opened that email, they know what time it was. And we don't think that's right. We want you to protect your privacy. So what they've done is basically they are prefetching images for emails that go to Apple devices. So you don't have to have an Apple email address or a Mac or email address. It's just, I have an iPhone. So any email that comes to an iPhone that has MPP implemented, they are going to prefetch the images. So people who are in the know is like, so how does this affect open? This is just images. Well, the way that we track opens is it's an invisible pixel that's in the email. And so if an email is read with images disabled, no open is ever triggered. If an email is read with images enabled, that little pixel goes back and they trigger an open. And open rates have been controversial since the start. They came into being right around 2000-ish is when we could start. It was when we figured this out. And even back then, I remember one night very specifically where we were at a conference and we were at the bar and the bar was closing. So it was probably 1 or 2 a.m. And two people in the industry had been fighting about open rates all night. One person said, they're really helpful. They teach us how people are engaging. They're super useful. And the other person was like, No, they're not, because you can read a whole email with images disabled and it doesn't trigger an open, and someone can scroll past the email in the preview pane with images enabled and it triggers an open even though they didn't look at it. So it's a useless metric. It doesn't really tell us anything. And they literally nearly got in a fist fight in the lobby as we were headed back up to our rooms. We had to pull them apart. So I think there was a lot of alcohol involved there. But the point of it is that open rates have never been absolute the way click-through rates are. With a click, there's either a click or there's not. And it's absolute, and that's that. Open rates have always had this margin of error in them. And again, where people read the whole email 10 times in detail, but they didn't have images enabled, so no open, or they didn't read it. So there's always been a margin of error. Now what's happening with Apple MPP is just that margin of error has gotten a lot larger. So the good news is that if you're doing, what I've always done with open rates is I've assumed that margin of error is roughly the same for the same list from send to send. Now, you can't assume it's the same between two completely different lists, but for the same list from send to send, the margin of error is probably roughly the same. But I think the key here is that a lot of people saw their open rates dramatically go up in the fourth quarter of last year and especially the first quarter of this year. And if you saw that, it's probably Apple MPP. It's probably not your great email marketing. Sorry about that. We also have been talking to people who saw their open rates go down. And what we found out from that is there are some ESPs that have decided that they are just going to not count any opens that happen from people who potentially are on an Apple device. And so they're ruling all those out, which is called, for those clients, their open rates have gone down. So there's a lot of crazy stuff going on with open rates right now. It's very fascinating. I think that it was done basically unilaterally by Apple. It wasn't a government regulation that did it. We have a keynote at the upcoming Email Innovation Summit in June in Las Vegas, where Matthew Dunn from Campaign Genius, who is brilliant on this stuff, is actually going to talk about not necessarily Apple MPP per se, but the idea of individual companies trying to put things like this in place to rein in marketers. And there are questions about legality, and there's questions about whether they have the right, and there's questions about what's next. Are other organizations going to follow suit and prefetch images so that we can't see when people open?
מדדי פתיחת אימיילים אף פעם לא היו מדויקים. עכשיו, בעקבות שינוי הפרטיות של אפל, הם יהיו פחות מדויקים. חלק ממערכות הדיוור התאימו את עצמם, חלק ממערכות הדיוור לא. הבלבול בקרב מדברים גדל, ונשאלת השאלה מהו הצעד הבא. האם הצעד הבא יהיה של אפל או של חברה אחרת, שגם היא תצטרף למהלך דומה, אולי גם נאבד בקרוב את ההקלקות. אמרתי לג'ין שלא מזמן צלצל אליי חבר ואמר לי, תשמע, אני רואה שאתה מתעסק באווירות, אימיילים, באימייל מרקטינג. זה מת הדבר הזה, זה נגמר. שאלתי ג'ין האם גם היא שומעת על זה, שאימייל אולי כמו חתול יש לו 9 נשמות, אבל האם גם היא מקבלת ממכרים וחברים שפחות מבינים את התעשייה הזאת, שהם מודאגים ואולי מציעים לה לחשוב על תעסוקה אחרת.
It's funny, years ago, I was talking with family members who I love, and I had started my consultancy a few years earlier, and I'll never forget because it was over dinner one night, and they were like, "So, since email's dying, like, what are you going to do? Are you going to switch to like search engine marketing?" Like, and I'm like, dying. It's not dying. And they're like, "Oh yeah, no, it's totally dying. We read about that in the newspaper. It's dying." But yeah, no, I don't think it's dying. I'll tell you, as much as there's things like Apple MPP that are making it more difficult for us to do a good job for our subscribers, because that's really what Apple MPP does. It interferes with that relationship between you and your subscribers. There are a lot of other things going on which suggest a very bright future for email. So one of the big ones is basically the banning of third-party cookies, which if you've been reading anything about that, a lot of the browsers now, there are third-party cookies on there that have information about all of us as we browse. And then there are ad networks and other people who you can buy in to get that information on the third-party cookie, and then you can serve ads based on it. Programmatic marketing is, for digital display advertising, is completely dependent on that. That's actually going away. The end date got pushed out a bit with the pandemic, but it's still going to go away. And I believe it with the increased concerns over privacy. So that's one thing that works well for email, because you don't need a third-party cookie to send email to your subscriber list. You also, if you're in email marketing and have a subscriber list, it's an amazing opportunity to get zero and first party data on those folks, which is data that they themselves provide to you. So for instance, my brother's a big Dave Matthews Band fan. We're actually going to a concert together. It's his Christmas gift this summer. And so I signed up for emails and texts from them. They asked me when my birthday was, what month. I was happy to let them know what month my birthday is. They gave me a discount on my birthday month in return for that. So that's an idea of them collecting zero party data. They asked me, I told them, I got, a discount for it. So that is going to bode very well for the future of email. The other thing that bodes very well for the future of email is people's disillusionment with social media platforms. I don't know about you, Sela, but a few weeks ago when Elon Musk announced that he was buying Twitter, I had a bunch of people that I follow and a bunch of people that I know personally who left the Twitter platform. They were like, we are just done with this. I had another friend a week or two ago who left Facebook. No longer doing Facebook. And I've had people leaving Facebook for years now. So people are becoming disillusioned with these social media networks. A lot of companies, social media has been very sexy for a long time. Email is not sexy. Social media is sexy. TikTok. Oh, we got to be on TikTok. The problem with those platforms is that the user, the person that you're trying to reach has a relationship with that platform, not with you. So when you're communicating with someone, you're on Twitter and you're trying to sell to your Twitter followers and you want them to buy, when they leave the platform, they leave you and you have no way to find them again. And that's not something that happens in email. No one owns the email platform. The relationship is between you and the subscriber directly. If the subscriber doesn't want to have that relationship anymore, they can unsubscribe. But that's the problem with these social media platforms. That's the problem with investing. A lot of people listening to this probably aren't old enough to remember MySpace, but I remember MySpace. Everyone was on MySpace. And then Facebook launched, and then no one was on MySpace. And I think that we're going to see that happen with a lot of these platforms. Like I said, we're already seeing it. And so you don't want to put too much of your focus and resources into building relationships on these platforms where you don't own these subscribers. And if they leave the platform that they have the relationship with, you have no way to get back in touch with them. So I think that also bodes well for email because it is that one-to-one relationship between you and the subscriber. So I don't think it's going away anytime soon. Years ago, people were saying, well, high school students don't use email, so it must be dead. And Lauren McDonald, who was with Silver Pop, who now does EV adoption, said, really? Because high school students don't drink really high quality red wine, but I don't think it's going anywhere anytime soon. So it's really just a preference. I have nieces and nephews, and agreed, they didn't use email when they were in high school, but now that they're out of college and they have jobs, they use email because business runs on email. So no, I don't think email is going away anytime soon. I think it's going to continue to change and morph, but that's what makes it fun. That's why we all love being in this industry.
אימייל הוא פלטפורמה פתוחה, הוא לא שייך לאף אחד. אף אחד הוא לא הבעלים שלו. אין איזשהו ענק טכנולוגי שמחזיק את הבעלות על האימייל. אימייל פתוח לכולם. הוא גם לא הולך לשום מקום, הוא לא הולך למות, למרות שכל פעם שרשת חברתית חדשה קמה, מישהו מפרסם בעיתון שאימייל מרקטינג מת, זו אולי כותרת שמושכת קוראים. אבל לא רק שהאימייל לא הולך לשום מקום, אנחנו רואים שיש דחייה מחודשת של דברים שכאילו כבר יצאו מהלקסיקון. SMS למשל חוזר עכשיו ובגדול.
Yes, and QR codes, which we never had a great use for. And then with the pandemic, QR codes have now blown up because every restaurant everywhere, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, no, email's not going anywhere. And I think it's like television. Television didn't kill the radio because there are times when you can't or you don't want to see the image. Oftentimes, if I can't be at a hockey game, I'm a big Washington Capitals fan. We're in the playoffs now. Yay. I will listen to games because the hockey announcers are really good at giving you a visual in your head about what's going on the ice. And if I'm listening to a game, I can be working or cooking or multitasking, driving around, doing errands. So I think email is very much like that. I mean, I use text messaging. I get text messages from brands. It just depends on what information you want to convey. I mean, going back to the Dave Matthews example, they sent me a text message to ask for what month I was born in. And I responded immediately. That was an easy answer. I knew the answer off the top of my head. If they had sent that via email, it would have been a really short email, and it probably wouldn't have gotten as much response. If they had piggybacked it on another message in an email, it probably would have gotten missed. So for quick communications like that, SMS text is great. But it's not so good for longer form stuff. I mean, we talked earlier about my client who was sending, multiple product information about multiple products in an email. That would be a terrible text message. Hi, let me tell you about our 6 new products with images. That would be a terrible text message. Nobody would want that. So you just want to pick the right channel for your communications, and there's place for all the channels.
Perfect.
Cool.
Thank you very much, Jeanne.
Thank you, Sela. Take care. Have a good day.
אתם מוזמנים להירשם לבלוג שלנו, הקישור CRM.Buzz בדפדפן שלכם.
הפודקאסט בחסות דאטה מדיה, המלווה ומייעצת לחברות בארץ ובחול בפעילות אימייל מרקטינג אפקטיבית ואווירות אימיילים. אימייל דליברביליטי.